forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Greetings, Happy New Year. Welcome to another year of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace alongside my co-host Aaron McIntyre. Hope you all had a safe, healthy, but enjoyable holiday season. Aaron, good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Could be better, but I could be a lot worse, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely.
Right? So a ton has gone on. And I planning out this week's episode, I'm like, I don't even know how to go through all of the news that has gone on in the few weeks we've been off in just 5 points. So I thought, let's not even try. Let's not even look at what's already transpired. Instead, let's fast forward. Let's look at what might happen in the future. So on Christmas Day, on our Twitter account over at Bigger Ten, I put forth 10 predictions that are Big Ten related for the upcoming year. And I thought it might be fun, Aaron, to have you, as we run these down, to have you give us your take on the efficacy or the likelihood that any of these actually go down in the next 12 months. You ready to go?
Absolutely.
All right, so that's what we're going to do for this week's episode, Top 10 Predictions for 2021. Let's get it started. The Big Ten will permit fans to return to football stadiums next fall, but only at half capacity.
I think that's going to be the initial offering, but I think it's going to end up somewhere around a quarter. I'm very, very skeptical about anything opening up after the last year, almost year that we've been through. Anything opening up to that degree, it seems like we have to take half baby steps anywhere to do basically anything. I would love it if it was half capacity. I would love to go to a game again. I mean, I've looked at like the Kansas City Chiefs. They have, I think, 15% capacity in their 77,000 seat stadium. Tickets really aren't any more expensive than they usually are because I think the demand has gone down as well a little bit. So I think when you open up to half capacity, you're still going to be able to go to a game or two if you want to, and that would be great. But I think it's just going to be lower than that, maybe more like a quarter.
All right, number 9. After not being a finalist for the Heisman Trophy, well, that turned out to be true, and not winning a national championship, we don't know yet if that's true, Justin Fields will decide to return to Ohio State for his senior season. Allow me to already tell you that this one's going to be wrong, all right? You don't throw for a gazillion yards and 28 touchdowns against Clemson in the playoffs and then say, yeah, I'm going to come back and improve my draft stock. You're good to go. You're good to go. And that prediction is going to be null and void.
Yeah, on Christmas when I was reading through these, this was one of the ones I thought was most likely to happen, actually, because I thought Ohio State might put up a good fight against Clemson, but there was just no way, right, given the season that happened and really not having stiff competition like Ohio State had the whole year. Or that Clemson had for some of the year, like facing Notre Dame a couple times. I just didn't think that Ohio State was going to be ready, and of course, everybody was wrong.
You know, Trevor Lawrence is moving on. Those Alabama stars are moving on. Kyle Trask is moving on.
Yep.
You're the guy the whole offseason, right? You're the overwhelming favorite. Your team's probably preseason number 1. And then you go out there and throw for 400 yards and 6 touchdowns in a national semifinal, and you're going to be the number 2 pick in the draft. All right, whether it's the Jets or the Jets trade that pick to somebody else, you're not coming back. Yeah, so forget that one. Let's see if number 8's got more of a shot. Michigan will either announce in January that Jim Harbaugh is not returning for it should be 7th season, or move on from him next November after another humiliating loss to Ohio State, meaning that at some point in the year 2021 year, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh will part ways.
Yep, I don't think there's much question about that. I mean, just barring a miracle next season. But as you pointed out on Michigan podcast many times now, there's 2 different large groups of Michigan players, it seems like, that are probably going to be heading for the portal, jumping in the portal once news comes one way or the other. So I think this is probably going to be Harbaugh's last year. Essentially what this is going to be, if he comes back, is another rebuilding job kind of another reloading, whatever you want to call it this year. Except he's going to have another year of disappointment under his belt, another year of, is this guy really the guy for the job? Is this coach really the coach for me? All of that adding together, it's just very unlikely, I think, that he's going to be able to pull out a rabbit out of his hat.
All right. Next, number 7, Penn State linebacker Micah Parsons will be the first defensive player chosen in the NFL draft.
I think this is a no-brainer.
I had
think
to give
maybe
myself
this year,
at least one layup. Yes.
I think maybe at times this year, Jadavion Nixon from Iowa maybe could have given him a run for the money. But if you would have said Big Ten, first defensive player out of the Big Ten chosen in the NFL draft, but this is overall in the NFL draft, overall in the college football, so I think this is probably most likely.
Number 6, Wisconsin and Iowa end up sharing the Big Ten men's basketball title.
I don't know, man. I don't know. I think it's either going to be Wisconsin alone or Michigan alone. I mean, Iowa, I don't want to urinate all over my favorite team, but they usually run out of gas towards the end of the season. But the way the Big Ten is again this year, it could be everybody's running out of gas.
I was just going to say everybody's going to run out of gas at some point this season.
So I would say sharing the title, I would say it's probably a better bet to just choose one instead of both.
I mean, I would be surprised if someone just like won it, meaning went like 17-3, something like that. I think you're more likely going to be, it's more of a game of survivor. You're the last team or 2 or 3. Didn't we have 3 teams share it last year, I believe? You're going to be the last set of teams or team standing at the end because this is carnage night in and night out. Although for those of us watching, it's a heck of a lot of fun. All right. Next prediction I made for 2021, 11 Big Ten basketball teams will qualify for the NCAA men's basketball tournament. It was just announced. They're going to play the whole event in Indiana, by the way. But what do you think?
So that would be leaving out Northwestern.
Well, I didn't say who we're leaving out yet, but I mean, Northwestern was in the top 25 last week. Yeah.
True. Nebraska, definitely.
Nebraska, we're leaving them out. But somebody's going to have a key injury, right?
Yeah.
And it's going to cost them 2 or 3 games, right? If you have this much attrition, someone's going to be that team. And I don't know, the last week it's kind of, you look at Rutgers with, what's going on with them against Iowa and then against the free throw shooting against Michigan State. That's a team whose analytics are really good except for free throw shooting. And in this league, last night against Michigan State, Aaron, they started off 0-6 at the free throw line. They just never recovered from that. Yeah. In this league, man, if you can't make a decent amount of free throws, you need all the easy points you can get in this league. So that could be a team that in another league, would be a first division or conference challenger, but maybe free throws cost them a bunch of close losses, right? You're going to get some attrition playing this kind of a schedule.
I think for folks my age and maybe younger watching this, and maybe your age too, Steve, in 10 to 15 years, you're going to be like, man, remember when the Big Ten was getting 11 teams, 9 teams into the NCAA tournament? Because most of the time, in most of my lifetime, and this is the norm for every single conference across the board, you're asking who's in. In the Big Ten, you're asking who's out. That's astounding. So I think that's a good one.
Next, number 4. Continuing to see 2021 as a transition year while vaccinations take place, the Big Ten will play an 11+1 football schedule model. Each team will be permitted 1 non-conference game, and then the other 11 will be conference games, and the season will start on time.
I think this was probably true. I want to say they're going to do like a 10-game schedule or something like that. But when you're telling your TV network and all of the networks who have a vested interest in Big Ten football, all right, you gave us a mulligan. We only played really 8 to 10 games, depending on the team. Sometimes some of them less. Last season, you're missing out on some revenue there. But this year, we would just want to play 10 games. Yeah. I don't think you're going to be able to get away with that. So you're going to have to go back to 12 games so that the TV networks and contracts can get their cheddar cheese. So I think that's probably pretty likely. It just seems 11 conference games. You think this Big Ten basketball season is a slobber knocker? That's going to be crazy.
Yeah,
if that
they're going to
happens.
play 12 games because of the TV thing you just said. I agree with that. The makeup of those 12 games, I think, will be very fascinating. For example, are you permitted is it 2 non-conference games then, but they both have to be regional, like a MAC team, Notre Dame, something like that, right? Okay. That's something to perhaps think about. All right. Number 3. After another disappointing season, Nebraska will fire both football coach Scott Frost and AD Bill Moose and have to start over again.
It brings me no pleasure as an Iowa fan to say this.
Don't
but
lie.
I think that this is true. And at the end of the day, you just kind of have to take stock of where Nebraska is as a program when you're making these predictions. And I think this is as true as any of them.
Number 2. Nice. Ohio State will become the first school ever to win 5 consecutive undisputed Big Ten football championships. They're already the first to win 4 in a row. And now, of course, this is tied into my original belief that Justin Fields will come back. But remember, man, they didn't have a quarterback heading
They
into
always
last
don't
season.
have a quarterback until
and
they
Justin
do.
Fields just fell right into their lap, right? Okay, so they'll find somebody, I'm sure.
Yeah. So my reasoning for this is just there's the thinking, don't mess with the streak, and then there's the regression to the mean. I always err on the side of regression to the mean when I see stuff like this. 5 undisputed Big Ten championships in a row. That seems so far out there. I'm just going to take the field. Having said that, I have no flipping clue who that might be, but I'm just going with the statistical regression there.
Number 1. After a bounce back next season, Penn State coach James Franklin moves on to either USC or Texas. Well, Texas decided to go ahead and fill their spot with Steve Sarkisian. So I'm going to say a school that Franklin has been linked with in the past, USC.
Yeah, we speculated last year, and we speculated a little bit after this season. Is he not long for Happy Valley there? And I still tend to believe that is the case. We'll see what he has coming back. You put out some stats. I think it was Bigger 10 the other day, comparing James Franklin with Moorhead, the old offensive coordinator, to James Franklin without him. And it's just astounding.
81% winning percentage with Joe Moorhead as his OC.
Yeah.
He's just about 60% win percentage at Penn State in the seasons when he didn't have Joe Moorhead as his OC.
So we'll see if he does bounce back. I think that's that likely means a parlay into a new gig somewhere, because it seems like maybe he's hit his own personal ceiling at Penn State, but I'm not totally sure that he will bounce back. So I'd say this is maybe a sell for me right now.
Well, that'll do it. I'll look at 10 predictions, almost none of them likely to come true, for 2021. At the end of the year, if we're still around here, we'll go back and take a look at these and see how many I ended up getting wrong, most of them, if not all. But when we come back, it's our first edition of the new year. Big Ten Would You Rather next. All right, let's get it going. This week's edition of Bigger 10, Would You Rather? Aaron, I start with you. Would you rather coach Nebraska or Northwestern in basketball?
I'd say probably Northwestern. They've had an identity a little bit longer than Nebraska has. I really liked Tim Miles as kind of a person and a coach, and he's great on the Big Ten Network now. I would just say, though, when you're starting from scratch again, even if it's a guy like Fred Hoiberg, who has some repertoire and actually developing, even if it is a transfer U type team, I think you're closer to where you want to be if you're Northwestern. I think it's Collins is the name of Northwestern's
Chris Collins, yep.
coach. That I think if I'm over there right now, I've already built it up enough. I just have to get my break. And maybe the break that he needs right now is just being in this conference and going 500. Or even if it's against the right people, sub-high 500 might be able to get you in the NCAA tournament. So I'd rather be Northwestern.
Is Nebraska still the only Power 5 team that It doesn't have a win in the NCAA tournament ever.
I believe so.
Northwestern it was in there too. Or maybe Nebraska only has one, like back when Danny Nee was the coach. But they have a very similar thin NCAA resume, the two of them, Northwestern and Nebraska.
This one's for you. Would you rather be Rutgers or Minnesota basketball right now?
I got to tell you, I've watched a lot of Big Ten basketball. I love the makeup of Rutgers' team. I love the amount of shot makers they can put on the floor at one time, but and they can still D you up as well as anybody in our conference. I am concerned about the free throw shooting team though, or free throw shooting thing. I'm going to go with Minnesota. As much as I love the makeup of Rutgers' team, I love Geo Baker. I love Ron Harper's kid who's like a sniper out there, a little hockey term. But the reason I'm going to go with Minnesota, they remind me of a team from my youth. And, you know, you go back to the last time the Big Ten was this good. The other day I heard Dan Dockich calling the Michigan-Maryland game. And, you know, the guy he was working with was talking, this is the best the Big Ten's ever been. He goes, it's up there. But he goes, I remember a time when it was better. You go to the late 80s, early 90s. And I would argue it was a little bit better than it is right now. And that's probably the period that Dockich is talking about. And, you know, my Michigan Wolverines won back-to-back Big Ten championships there in the late 80s. And a team that we just could not beat was Michigan State. And the makeup of their team was very similar to what I see from Minnesota. Marcus Carr is in the Scott Skiles role. And then the rest of these guys, individually, like none of them are NBA players, but they all fill a role. The transfer from Drake, he adds length in the interior, and he's a stretch five. He can shoot from outside. The Western Michigan kid is a 3-point shooter. They all kind of, Gabe Tauscher's kind of the glue guy, right? They all kind of fit a role. And I don't think they can win our league. And, you know, Michigan State was good when Scott Skiles was there, and they didn't win the Big Ten either. They didn't have enough to win the league. But from a matchup standpoint, that was a very difficult team. And if they had not gotten robbed by the clock operator at Kemper Arena, they would have upset number 1 seeded Kansas in the Sweet 16 and probably gone to the Final Four. So I'm going to say Minnesota because I like the makeup. Even though I love Rutgers' team more, I like the way that the pieces mesh with Minnesota. And I think that's a team that has a chance to make some real noise in the NCAA tournament with Marcus Carr kind of playing the role of, who am I thinking of? Shabazz Napier
yep.
At UConn a few years ago. I think he's that kind of a player. But that's a tough call. Either one of those choices I think are good. For you, would you rather try to beat a team for a third time in the same basketball season in a one-and-done postseason tournament, or have to upset a number 1 seed in that same situation?
I'd rather upset a number 1 seed. I will never forget.
Meaning you think it's harder to beat a team 3 times?
I think it's harder to beat a team 3 times. I mean, I'll never forget sitting midday. My mom was great. I was homeschooled. And she would let me and my brother sit and do our homework while we had games on in the background during March Madness. And I will never forget a midday game between, I think, 9th seeded UNI and number 1 seeded Kansas. And, you know, Ali Farouk-Manesh.
Oh, yeah.
And just the unfearlessness that you can go into. And I mean, UMBC a couple, 2-3 years ago, University of Maryland, Baltimore. I mean, the fearlessness that you can just go in for one shining moment and just play out of your freaking minds. I think that's a lot easier of a task than playing a team for a third time. You know, it's something that's interesting, Steve. I don't know if you've noticed this quite a bit. You would think in sports handicapping, and you're seeing this with a lot of conferences right now, where they will play the same team back-to-back at the same venue. Mm-hmm. And it'll either be back-to-back days or maybe one day in between. You would think the results would be exactly the same. They're really not. They're really not. Teams get smarter, I think, a little bit, and they know a little bit more of what's coming. So that's kind of a now the result might be the same, but it's not going to be necessarily the same spread or same total, what have you. So I think that's kind of indicative that it's very, very difficult to get the same result 2 times, much less 3 times.
Okay.
Final one is for you. If you're a starter on Nebraska's football team right now, would you rather be in the transfer portal or stay?
I'm probably staying, man, because they've lost so many guys in the transfer portal. There's got to be an ample opportunity for me to prove I can play. And I think that's the big issue with why he can't get above water. I still don't think he's built a culture there, although this year there were more signs of it than we saw the previous few years of the kind of culture you want to see at Nebraska. But B, what's their recruiting base? They're trying to pull all these kids from the West Coast and they're losing a lot to attrition. It just seems like right when they get their numbers up, they get a bunch of attrition again. So I don't know, man. Given that attrition, I'm going to probably stick around and give it my best shot to play. I got to think if I can't play here at Nebraska right now, then I don't know where else in the Power 5 that I'd want to play that I think I'd have a better shot to play. You know what I'm trying to say? It's not like Nebraska's too deep at almost every position right now. So we'll come back. Our Twitter poll and then our question of the week is next. This week's Twitter poll results, simple question. Will Ohio State beat Alabama to win the college football playoff? 52% of you said yes. 52.3 to be precise. 47.7 said no. I actually was a yes until I got the news yesterday. Because I think Ohio State matches up with them very well.
Yeah.
Because to play Alabama, you have to be able to put up 40 points minimum. And they can. Okay. But then Alabama let us know that Jalen Waddle's going to be back for this game. I know it seems like it was eons ago, Do you remember Jalen Waddle against Ole Miss in that game earlier this year? Before he hurt his hip, everybody thought he was a better player than Devonta Smith. People were talking about Jalen Waddle for Heisman. Do you remember this?
A little bit, yeah.
I mean, now, so to me, I don't know how you can defend that now. That to me is unbelievable when you could put those two guys next to each other. And even if Waddle is at 80, 85%, the amount of attention that you're going to have to put on Devonta Smith, I mean, that's still good enough for Jalen Waddle to beat man-to-man coverage, right? Now we're talking about a couple of defensive linemen being out for Ohio State because you're not going to be able to get away with blitz and bam. You're going to have to be able to get pressure with your front four. The Jalen Waddle factor, to me, I think makes it very difficult for Ohio State to win the game. But what do you think?
Yeah, every bit of me thinks this is going to be a pretty high-scoring shootout. And there's no reason to think that it won't be because Alabama, as you mentioned, can put up a lot of points. So if you want to hang with them, you got to put up a lot of points as well. And what happens when everything is saying it's going to be this way? It's going to be a defensive slugfest, isn't it? It's going to be one of those weird, wacky games. So I tend to think Ohio State can beat Alabama. But goodness gracious, it's a really, really difficult call to make. So I think I'm probably going to go with Alabama. They've been in this situation more times recently than Ohio State has, though not a heck of a lot more in proportion to the rest of the college football landscape. And so I'm just going to go with Saban over Ohio State right now, basically.
All right. This week's question of the week from Dan Wolken.
Wow.
Come on, Dan. How many college football players died of COVID this season? How many of the positive tests resulted in hospitalizations? All right, Dan Wolken didn't actually send us a question, but I just had to give a tip of the cap to America's absolutely worst sports writer. Now that we're through the season, NFL got through every game, all 256 games. College football got to the national championship. Remember when Wolken was all Jar Jar Binks? You say people are going to die? Remember that? Okay. Right? Don't forget any of those fiends. Like when you woke up New Year's Day with a chance to watch some bowl games and the premier day on the college football calendar and just a smidge of normalcy in what was an otherwise awful year. Never forget complete pusses like Dan Wolken. Just walking orifices. Didn't want any of that to happen. Don't ever, ever forget that. That'll do it for this week's edition of Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter @Bigger10 to keep up to date with what we think on all things Big Ten all week long. Back at it again next week for Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then.